Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Liz Bridgewater, the Director of Outreach at Climate Action Now. It will be just a few moments while people continue to gather. While we're waiting for everyone to join, I invite you to answer the icebreaker questions that you'll see pop up on your screen in just a moment. Alrighty, you should be seeing that poll now. The first question is, what's your current mood around climate change? Secondly, getting us to a core part of today's conversation, what makes you feel hopeful about climate change? And finally, what motivated you to join this monthly dose of Climate Hope event today? If you're feeling up for it, please also share your video so we can all see each other. We will be recording this event and it will be available publicly online. If you do not wish to appear in any shared content, please keep your camera off. We'll send out the recording after this event. I'm very grateful that everyone is here today because even though the news has been upsetting lately, there really is still hopeful information about the climate out there. People just don't hear enough about it. So thank you for joining us today to get your June monthly dose of climate hope. Let's share the results of our icebreaker poll now. Kaylee, would you share those results?
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Kaylee Beam, Director of Content at Climate Action Now. And before we kick off the interview, I'm going to share those results of our icebreaker poll. So don't worry if you didn't get to participate. We're just going to basically talk over how everyone responded. So you should be seeing them on your screen in just a moment. And our first question is, what's your current mood around climate change? So our most popular answer is, I feel a mix of many emotions. Totally fair. I think there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful, a lot of reasons to feel some of that fear and doom, but I think that's why it's so important for us to be able to come together like this and hear about the solutions in progress and some of the reasons we have to be hopeful. I think it's important to remember that there are good things happening at the same time bad things are happening. Our next question is, what makes you feel hopeful about climate change? We've got a great mix of responses here, which I love. Shout out to those of you who chose activism from concerned citizens, because that's definitely our bread and butter here at Climate Action Now. But this whole list is just a great reminder of how many levers for change there are. And on to our last question, what motivated you to join this monthly Dose of Climate Hope event today? And I'm heartened to see that it looks like many of you are in desperate need of a dose of climate hope, which means you've come to the right place. You'll be getting your monthly dose today, but if you're ever in need of a daily or weekly dose, just make sure you're subscribed to our Dose of Climate Hope newsletter, which we will drop a link to in the chat. So thank you so much for participating in our poll to kick things off and get us ready for a hopeful conversation today. I'm going to hand things back to Liz to introduce our speakers and get things started. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kaylee. Today, Sam Matey, the editor-in-chief of Climate Action Now, will be talking with our incredible guest speaker, Bill McKibben. Sam authors the Dose of Climate Hope Substack newsletter for Climate Action Now. Dose of Climate Hope illustrates new technologies, policy solutions, people, and trends that give us reasons to be hopeful about the climate. Bill McKibben is a renowned climate activist, author, and founder of Third Act, which mobilizes people over 60 for climate and justice. He co-founded 350.org, the first global grassroots climate campaign, and has played a leading role in movements opposing fossil fuel infrastructure and driving the $40 trillion fossil fuel divestment campaign. A prolific writer, McKibben's work appears in outlets like The New Yorker and Rolling Stone, and his groundbreaking book, The End of Nature, was the first on climate change for a general audience. He has received the Right Livelihood Award, the Gandhi Peace Prize, and numerous honorary degrees for his contributions to the climate movement. We're so excited to hear from Bill today. We'll now transition into our live interview. As you hear from Bill and Sam, please type any questions you'd like to contribute to the discussion into the chat. Over to you, Sam.
Hi, so I'm incredibly honored to be here today. I full spoke to Bill McKibben in Polson in 2023, and we've corresponded off and on since then, and I've never lost that just kind of amazing feeling that I'm actually talking to this guy, this amazing inspirational figure that's been one of the first voices in human civilization to really mobilize people to stabilize our atmosphere and biosphere. So Bill, I have so many things I want to ask you. Some of the major topics I want to cover sort of segue into each other and overlap with each other. So I have a bunch of stuff I want to talk about. But let's just start with the elephant in the room. Maybe the most, yeah, as Americans in a very dangerous and scary period for America, it's very understandable to focus on American news. But bigger than that, maybe the most important thing happening in the world that doesn't get nearly as much coverage as it should is what's happening in China right now and what that means for the world. China has kind of reoriented its entire economy around clean energy technologies, which provided like 10% of its GDP growth last year. China's exporting vast quantities of solar power. China built 60 gigawatts of solar in 3 months at the beginning of this year. For context, America built like 96, has only 96 gigawatts of nuclear power plants total. A vast flood of really cheap clean energy products, from electric cars to solar panels to batteries, is coming out of China, and that's leading to electrification and clean energy spreading at a rate that would have seemed impossible as recently as 5 years ago. So, what's your thoughts? What's your thought on that, and what is your sort of thought on the meaning and heft and global relevance of that?
Sure, that's a really good question. So first of all, it's great to be with you, Sam, and your colleagues here. Many thanks for all the work that you do. And let's talk about China. Let's first talk about it, though, very briefly in context of the United States, because it's necessary to say that we meet today at a moment of great sadness and in many ways great decline for the United States. As we talk today, there are Marines and National Guardsmen deploying in Los Angeles in order to stop peaceful dissent from our autocratic and crazy rulers who are doing their best, among many other things, to stamp out our efforts to compete with China on this most crucial of fronts. And let me just add, everybody, if you happen to know any, old people like me, and we seem especially a little somber today, it's because earlier today we lost Brian Wilson, perhaps the greatest poet of the Sun and of California, the greatest regional poet of California that California ever produced. And it's a moment when good vibrations are lacking in our country, let us say. In stark contrast, Sam, as you point out, to what's happening in the most populous nation in the world, and now the most dynamic nation in the world. I have many, many problems with China. I've spent a lot of time there over the years. I'm well aware that if I lived in China and did the things that I do, I'd be in jail for the rest of my life. So I have I have plenty to say about the flaws in the Chinese system. On the other hand, it seems to be a country capable at this point of operating logically as regards the future. And they're going to own that future in very short order. We've talked for a long time in this world about petrostates, but China is emerging as the first electrostate on the planet. And as you point out, it's happening very, very quickly. It's over the last 3 or 4 years that the Chinese have radically built out this vast spread of solar panels and wind turbines and batteries. Now, I saw earlier parts of that. 15 years ago, I was in China reporting for the National Geographic about kind of the early stages of this, the first big solar panel factories, the first big solar thermal factories. And that was that was work that, and we should be clear, that happened in large part because of great activism in the West, not in the United States in this case, but in Germany, where the Green Party used its electoral power to mandate this Energiewende, this feed-in tariff for solar panels on people's roofs. And that was an expensive and very powerful gift for the Germans to give the rest of the world, because it was the demand that allowed the Chinese to put their manufacturing prowess to work, learning how to build solar panels and batteries very, very cheaply. As a result of that, sometime in the last 3 or 4 years, we crossed some invisible line where it became cheaper to produce power from the sun and the wind than from burning coal and gas and oil. The Chinese were the first to fully realize that, and they are now building more than half the clean energy that we have in the world. But they're building so much that it's leaking quickly beyond their borders in very powerful ways. Maybe the most encouraging story of the last couple of years is not what's happening in China, but what's happening next door in Pakistan, where with
my next question, yeah,
Pakistan shares a border and hence a robust trade relationship with China. A couple of years ago, all the guys who'd been making their living exporting cement or rice or whatever else they were exporting began to figure out that solar panels were super cheap and that there would be a big demand for them in Pakistan because Pakistan has an expensive and unreliable electric grid. Ironically, much of that electric grid is Chinese-financed coal-fired power plants. So in this case, the Chinese are competing with themselves, but the Pakistanis are the winners. Pakistanis operating by themselves have installed roughly the equivalent of half the national electric grid over the last year. If you look at Google Earth images from Lahore or Karachi or Islamabad, what you just see is a sea of solar panels on every apartment, every factory, every small store, everything else. It's really, really remarkable. And they've done it, on their own. I was just talking with Danny Kennedy, the great solar guru who'd been over there in January to sort of look around. And he said, people basically were installing these things, learning how to do it off TikTok videos. And happily, this is incredibly simple technology. Nobody can install a coal-fired power plant, much less a nuclear reactor on their roof or their balcony. But people with a rudimentary knowledge of electrical wiring can put up. If you think about it, it's just magic. Can put up a cheap set of glass panes that are able to translate the extraordinary power of the sun 93 million miles away into the power that we need to run our lives. That's the most interesting thing happening around the world right now by far. It's an epochal human transformation, at least as important as when we learned to burn fossil fuel in the Industrial Revolution. I think in some ways as important as when we learned to grow food. And this is, powerful in many ways that we can discuss. One of them, the most pressing, is that it begins perhaps to allow us to take the very worst edge off the climate crisis. The Chinese used 5% less coal to generate power in the first quarter of this year than they did last year, which is a good and impressive number. But it also is liberating in all kinds of other ways that we should probably talk about.
Yes, like this is what amazes me. Like, this really is transformative. This is unbelievably transformative. I was in India last year around this time, and I went to what was then one of the world's biggest solar farms, but has now moved way down the list because a lot of bigger ones have been built. And that was in an area where agriculture was becoming really difficult due to years and years of prolonged drought. And so they shifted the entire landscape into farming clean electrons. And it was bringing in revenue for the community, creating jobs. People had moved from farming to being solar panel like maintenance workers or security guards or a bunch of stuff. And there's been a long statement that nothing's a silver bullet in climate change, and nothing really is. But solar power, in Germany, it is now cheaper to build a fence with solar panels that you can hook up to produce power than with actual wood like fence pilings. Solar panels have gotten so cheap, so fast, and they are this no emissions, no moving part source of power that, like you say, that is the most important thing happening in the world today. That is just unbelievably huge. And what really is starting to excite me is that that's not just a way to help prevent climate change. It's a way to help survive climate change. Because Pakistan, some of Pakistani cities like Jalalabad last year suffered like weeks above 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And a solar panel can power an air conditioner or even a fan, and that
Yep.
could save the life of your elderly relative. Or like in
Yep.
Bangladesh, the early warning system for typhoons has reduced deaths from storm surge so much, and just one charged phone per village gets you early warnings. So what are your thoughts on sort of, like you said, the other reason this is important, the ripple effects of how good for the world it is that people can now buy a flat panel that gives them power, literal power and metaphorical power?
I think what you're saying is so right. 25 years ago, 20 years ago, I was in Bangladesh and I saw literally the first solar panel that had been installed in that country. It's now one of the leading solar nations on the earth. And what that means is, especially for poor countries, is that they are liberated from the tyranny of oligarchs around the world. If you're a developing country, we often talk about the debt crisis and the balance of payments crisis and things in these countries. What that usually means is trying to raise the money, trying to raise the cash to pay for the next shipload of diesel that's swinging out in the harbor at anchor, so that you can keep your economy going. The idea that we're now at the place where we can transfer to resource that's available everywhere, works better towards the equator than it does towards the pole. Um, that's incredibly liberating. Everybody has sun, everybody has wind, nobody can hoard them. You can't hold them in reserves. It seems to me highly unlikely anyone's ever going to fight a war over access to sunshine or to wind. It's a different reality, and it could be as liberating for Americans as anybody else. Our biggest oil and gas barons, are the Koch brothers. They own more refining capacity and pipeline capacity and stuff than anyone else, and they use their winnings to destroy our democracy. The idea that we can get that money back and run our country on the sun and the wind. Yeah, I mean, look around me now. The sun is shining, the wind is blowing. I'm making the power that powers this conversation, that powers the car and the bicycle that I use to get in and out of here. On and on and on. It's a different world, and it's not by any means a perfect one because we waited too long, and that means that we're not going to stop global warming. We may, and I emphasize may because I know more climate science than I should, we may still be able to stop things short of the point where we cut civilization off at the knees. We also may not be able to do that. But even if things get very bad, your other point is quite salient. In a world that is in big trouble, very good to be able to rely on the low tech and absolutely ubiquitous sun and wind for power that we need.
Yeah, because this is fundamentally, like you said, a technology of freedom. Like, even if it's made in an authoritarian state like China, China can't wield controllable solar panels the way that Saudi Arabia does with oil, because once you buy the solar panel, it's generating power and you don't have to pay for more sunlight like you have to pay for more oil. There's no fuel cost. It's
That's
why
exactly right.
Yeah.
And people really need to get that into their heads because it's so interesting. So, one shipload full of solar panels carries roughly 500 times more energy than a shipload full of oil, because once you put them up, they're going to be there supplying energy for decades to come. It's exactly the opposite business model of the fossil fuel industry, which explains precisely why the fossil fuel industry is fighting so hard to make sure that this transition goes as slowly as possible. And that's what we're up against, particularly in the United States. And it's the reason, one of the reasons that we're doing this big Sunday effort heading towards the autumnal equinox on September 21st.
Yeah, yeah. So let's lead into that. Like, someone just asked in the chat, like, is the present American government blocking individuals from acquiring solar due to tariffs on the Chinese? Can Made in America pick up the slack? And I just put in like this is what your Sunday is about. Like, in a way, all those people in Pakistan got solar for cheaper than we can get it here in America. Like, because they can buy Chinese solar panels. And the lovely current administration that was sarcasm has imposed a 3,518% tariff on Chinese solar panels. So there was a 100% tariff under Biden, but that at least that at least was paired with efforts to build up domestic solar capacity. Now they're trying to cut away the supports that build that up as well. So we end up with no solar to go imported. So
if you're not going to allow us to import Chinese solar panels and Chinese EVs, which are now the gold standard around the world, then at the very least you need to be doing what Biden was doing, which was trying very hard to build up the American equivalent industries. And we were making a good start of that under the IRA. Now we've decided to trash all that. And really the Trump administration, there were a couple of stories in the last couple of weeks, the Trump administration just saying, you know what, we're never going to beat the Chinese on all this stuff, so we're just going to try and hold on to the fossil fuel industry as long as we can. There's never been an American surrender like that of an industry over time. And it's
like when the Soviets launched Sputnik, we went, well, you know, space seems like a communist thing. We're not going to try to build our own rockets.
Russians are going to do space. Yeah, exactly. So the American government at all levels is trying to block this transition. And a lot of that is very purposeful on behalf of the fossil fuel industry. But some of it's just, our bizarre way of doing things. When we talk about rooftop solar in this country, it costs about 3 times as much to put it up as it does in Australia or the EU. And that's why Australia, for instance, has 7 times more households on percentage basis that have solar panels up on the roof. The cost difference is not the solar panels themselves. They're essentially a commodity now. The cost difference is the time it takes, the permitting costs and time costs that come from having to go through. We have about 18,000 jurisdictions in this country, each one with their own rules about things. And it's very, very time consuming to be up back and forth to town hall. That doesn't happen in the rest of the world. Basically, we just let anybody put these things up in other places and then go back and, audit every 20th one to make sure the installers are doing a good job or whatever. But that's why it's so much cheaper to do it anywhere else. And we can change that. That's actually one of the achievable goals of Sunday. We're not crazy. We know that Congress isn't going to pass anything this year. Congress is bought and paid for by the fossil fuel industry at the moment. But there are blue city governors, blue city mayors, and blue state governors across the state who can easily make it much, much more possible to roll out solar at an individual level. And we can deeply pressure utilities through things like state public utility commissions to clean up the interconnection queue and make it very possible to install many, many more of the projects that are already ready to go. The good news here is that there are parts of America that really have gotten their act together. In California, which has done more about this than anybody else, we're now generating day after day more than 100% of the power that California uses for long stretches of the day from renewable energy. which means that at night when the sun drops, the biggest source of supply on the California grid are batteries that did not exist 3 or 4 years ago. California is now being dramatically outpaced by Texas in this regard. That's where more clean energy is going in than any place else right now. The Texas state legislature, just in the last couple of weeks, tried at the urging of the fossil fuel industry, which obviously has a heavy footprint in Texas, to complicate that work a lot. The most dangerous bill that came close to passing, would have been essentially an affirmative action program for natural gas, requiring anyone who put in 5 megawatts of solar to put in a 5 megawatts worth of natural gas too. It was DEI, but for dirty fossil fuel. Happily, legislators from around residents from around rural Texas showed up to say, don't do this. Our county schools run on the revenues we get from the wind turbines, on and on and on. And so the Texas legislature, by narrow margins, didn't pass that at the last minute. And happily, the Texas legislature only meets every 2 years. So by the time they get back to work in 2027, this is going to be powerful change underway across the Lone Star State.
Yeah, and that Texas example, I love that example. There's this old quote from Stephen Colbert that really keeps ringing in my head as I read about stories like that, and it's reality has a well-known liberal bias. And at some point, the reality that solar panels are just better and cheaper exalts a force of its own. Even if you're outshouted on social media by crazy people, at some point, people wanting to make money will just go, what's the cheapest and best way I can get electricity? And that's now clean electricity. Like gas turbines, the manufacturers of gas turbines are pre-ordered 4 years in advance. If you order a gas turbine for your gas plant today, you have to wait 4 years. But solar panels, even from the limited domestic US solar supply, you get it a lot faster than that. And that just has a compounding effect. Like over 95% of new electricity generating capacity. Oh, sorry, gotta be slow. I always talk too fast. Over 95% of new electricity generating capacity added in the US last year was clean energy, solar, wind, and batteries. And
yes,
it's not nearly as much as we need to replace fossil fuels, but anyone with actual money on the table comes to realize pretty soon that solar is the best option. It is like you said,
I mean,
die for fossil fuels to even try to be competitive.
so the situation has dramatically changed. I mean, for the first 30 years of the climate movement, part of the job was to make fossil fuel more expensive, really. Carbon taxes or slowing their infrastructure or divestment or all those important things, because fossil fuel was cheap and renewable energy was expensive. I think a lot of us are sort of still in that mindset. Even people who care about this stuff still think of sun and wind as alternative energy. One of the goals of Sunday is to make it clear to everyone that that's no longer true. This is not the Whole Foods of energy, nice but pricey. This is the Costco of energy, cheap, available in bulk, on the shelf, ready to go. And so we have huge opportunity to make that case and to help accelerate this spread of solar power and wind power and batteries very dramatically across the country. But the case needs to be made because people often with astroturf groups funded by the fossil fuel industry are successfully blocking one project after another across this country. And there's about 15% of counties in America now where you basically can't build new renewable energy projects. And that's not just sad on climate grounds and on pollution grounds and on everything else. It's, as we were intimating before, a perfect way to make sure that our children and grandchildren end up global losers, the caboose on the most important train that's now leaving the station with the Chinese at the wheel.
Yeah, and so moving forward on that, there is this dichotomy that like the huge surge in cheap clean energy technologies from China is sort of deeply threatening as an American, but also deeply reassuring as a human. Because if that wasn't happening, if China had not industrialized, if it was
Yep.
still a giant-sized North Korea like under Mao, then the situation on climate change would look so much worse. We would not have this wave of
Yes.
electrification across the global south.
This is
Yeah.
the first scalable thing that's happened in the climate era. The first thing that actually, because we've very with all the goodwill in the world talked hard about things like let's change the way that people live and what they desire and what they want and so on. Those things are important. I wrote a book years ago called Deep Economy. That's a real effort to look at what economic growth does and doesn't provide. And the answer is less than it seems to. But it's also true that in the time that physics is giving us to deal with climate change, we're not going to see a radical revolution in human desire. In fact, about 100 million humans each year now enter what we call the consumer class, most of them in Asia, and some in Africa. The pressure to provide more energy for more people is going to be very real for a long time. And that's far more important than, for me, frankly, idiotic uses like more data centers for, whatever. But be that as it may, that demand is going to be there. We can grow renewable energy so fast that we can, if we really set our minds to it, deal with it. If every place in the world was doing this at the rate the Chinese are doing it now, the world would be transformed in a matter of years. I mean, in a handful of years.
Yeah, and that really circles back to Sunday, what's on the t-shirt, like the plan, which has really excited me to really like stage a moment with inspired by Earth Day 1970 and the amazing stuff that unleashed, also under a highly corrupt Republican president, but not as bad as this one, of creating sort of a cultural zeitgeist shift towards a better world. So could you tell me like
Yes.
the case for Sunday, the plan for Sunday, and
yes,
what
absolutely. So everybody can join in. It's sunday.earth. It's very loosely organized. Think of this as a potluck supper, if you will. That's the date, and because it's the autumnal equinox, September 21st. And that's the theme, the beauty of the sun and the need to produce. So anybody can come up with anything to any kind of event. Just register it there and get going with your friends and neighbors. We're hearing from people who are going to have parades of EVs and e-bikes, people who are going to be doing across their communities open houses so that people can go see a heat pump in operation. We have lots of communities where people with solar panels are all planning to put green lights in their window that night so everyone will know sort of who they are, on and on and on. It's, hopefully it'll be a day of great beauty. And one of the ways you can contribute right now is at sunday.earth, helping. The logo is this black half of the sun here. And there's a drawing tool that 10,000 or so people have used already that allows you to complete that sun in your own way. And if you go to the global gallery there at sunday.earth, and I hope some people will do it just as we're having this conversation because it's easy to use, you can add your own inspired account of what things should look like. Look, by itself, days like this can't change everything. What they can do is shift the zeitgeist a little bit. And I think actually right now, people are, obviously we're having to play defense on 1,000 fronts, try and stop the insane cuts to the EPA and the IRA and on and on and on. But it is nice to actually be able to have a positive vision for something too, that we can look at and say, here's where we can get something done.
Yeah, absolutely. And specifically, I'm thinking about Sunday, like what do you have like a priority scale, or are you trying to coordinate major actions in a couple cities, or do you want it to be more decentralized, or are you just leaving it
Highly
totally open?
distributed, highly distributed. Hopefully, there'll be
Okay.
hundreds of these across the country. That's really what we need, because by its nature, clean energy is distributed. That's one of the things that makes it different from the centralized power paradigm that we've been living under. With a few hundred big hulking coal-fired power plants, whatever they are. Now we're talking about energy that needs to be deployed everywhere.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
one of the things that we'll definitely be doing in a bunch of places is emphasizing the kind of what's the right word for it? The way that this coexists and supports so many other good things. So, for instance, one of the things that makes solar power so charming is that if you apply it wisely, you can develop these agrovoltaic operations that are both energy producer and food producer. Or even more beautifully, I've been writing about this a lot, places where people have used it as an opportunity to plant pollinator friendly native plants and uh, uh, dramatically increase the number of pollinating insects all over the place, helping solve the biodiversity crisis that's second only to the climate threat as a kind of break, drag on the future of our planet.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this too. And at Climate Action Now, that's really one of the emerging themes we're trying to tell people about, to tell state legislators about, because there's so many astroturf sort of movements trying to split the environmental movement and say, oh, well, solar panels are somehow industrializing a landscape, or wind turbines or causing cancer, or these imaginary things, just sort of projecting the sins of the fossil fuel industry onto clean energy. And and in actual fact, like there are tons and tons of examples. There's more and more studies coming out where of wildlife and clean energy coexisting, like you've written about, that
Well,
study. Go ahead.
no, absolutely. And one of the things that makes that possible is, our one of the things that we as writers, Sam, have to do is help people see the world through slightly different eyes. So, for instance, we're used to looking at, say, a cornfield and thinking that's nature. But really, a cornfield, and almost half the corn in this country is turned into gasoline. We're just growing ethanol. A cornfield's pretty much a biological desert. There are no pollinators there. Corn self-pollinates, and we spray it with herbicides and pesticides to make sure nothing else gets in there. Um, those fields, truthfully, the 30 million acres we devote to growing ethanol in this country are pretty much precisely the amount of acres we'd need to cover with solar panels to produce all the power that America would ever need. But we're not going to do it all there, obviously, but we can do some. And in return, you get not only those clean electrons, you also get a much less disturbed environment. You have row after row of native weeds growing there, allowing all kinds of other good things to happen. Maybe you have a herd of sheep that comes in and grazes them once or twice a year to keep them below the level of the panels. On and on and on. The possibilities here are really remarkable. They just require us to think a little differently. And that's hard. It's hard because of vested interest, which we've already discussed. The fossil fuel industry is well aware of the threat that they're under, and they're mobilizing to prevent it. That's why they spent more money on the last election cycle than they've ever spent. And the other threat beyond vested interest is just inertia. We change slowly. And in this case, physics isn't giving us that opportunity. We have to change fast. So in the best world, this becomes for the whole planet the kind of equivalent of what the moonshot was for Americans in the 1960s, a unifying project that lets us cooperate on something really remarkable. In that case, it was putting two guys on the moon. In this case, it's bringing our local star down to Earth to allow it to power this most beautiful of the solar system's planets.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like you said, like it is non-intuitive because we look at solar panels and it's like, it looks like sort of a rectangular artificial thing. But like if you think about it, no emissions, no moving parts. If you're putting solar panels on a what used to be a cornfield, that's no longer getting pesticides sprayed on it. It's no longer getting harvested with a crop harvester. It will over and over again finding that if you put solar panels on a landscape, whether it's a former farm field or even a desert that used to be totally wild, more stuff lives there than before you put the solar panels there. There's studies from Arizona, China finding that desert plants grow more when you put solar panels there because they provide some shade and a windbreak and allow water to condense on them.
That's right. And one of the things that the Chinese are discovering, and I think we're finding the same thing in the desert Southwest, is that in arid environments, the crust that forms on the desert floor is a very valuable thing and one that we've destroyed in many cases, but that in solar farms it can grow back fairly powerfully, fairly easily. The Chinese are using solar farms for that reason as a kind of buffer against the huge dust storms that for the last 30 years have ravaged the North China. And they're finding that this is a very powerful break on those. So there's much research underway on all forms of this, and much more needed. But if humans apply these technologies in good faith with good hearts, there's so much that can be done.
Yes, there is like a huge amount of work to do, but more than ever, we actually have the tools to do it with. We actually have like like you said, we live on a planet where you can point a sheet of glass at the sun, and that's the cheapest way to get power. We have this magical like a leaf for human civilization's tree, this incredible technology that just provides this huge flood of clean electrons, and there's so much we can do with that.
So I really want, since we're Americans, to remind us that this was a technology invented in the United States, and not that long ago, 1954 at Bell Labs in New Jersey. That's where the solar cell came from. So we've had, it's only been 70 years that we've had this ability. Now, America could have built this all much more quickly. We now understand a lot about the kind of turning points of this history. When he was running for president re-election in 1980, Jimmy Carter's budget for the next year was an effort, as he explained, to get us to the point where America would be producing 20% of its energy from the sun by the year 2000. And there was no particular technological obstacle in the way of that. We just needed to keep speeding up the rate at which we were iterating this technology. Instead, we chose a very different path. Ronald Reagan ripped Jimmy Carter's solar panels off the roof of the White House, and things went into abeyance for a number of years. We cannot afford to let that happen again. We now have to move at speed to make things happen fast. No more, no more Reagans. And of course, that's precisely what Trump is trying to do. He can't prevent the rest of the world from changing, though he can slow it down. One of the things that's happening right now, and we just saw bad news on this front from the Japanese today, is that he's been strong-arming countries around the world into buying more LNG from the US on the threat that he will tariff them otherwise. And the Japanese just made a big commitment today. So those are the kind of things that can slow things down when we desperately don't want them to be slowed down. That's why we have to push. If we had 40 years, no problem. 40 years from now, we're going to run the planet on sun and wind because of its cheapness. But if it takes us anything like 40 years to do it, the world that we run on sun and wind will be a broken world. the IPCC, as you know, has told us we need to cut emissions in half by 2030, which, by my watch is 4 years and 5 months away. So we have our work cut out for us in a serious way.
Yeah, but we absolutely do. It's very, very serious. But we also have some points on the board. We also have some incredible technologies and incredible progress and incredible rapid deployment of stuff that would have seemed like a utopian fantasy a couple decades ago. So
Yep.
the fundamental
So the deciding factor here, as is often the case, is going to be how much public pressure we can build to allow us to unleash and liberate those forces. And if we build enough public pressure, then the rate at which we do this, we're trying to force the spring. We're trying to catalyze a reaction here. And so we shall see. There's some good political science around the world. The election of Mark Carney in Canada is a good sign. This is a person who understands the climate crisis. He's got a hard job because Alberta is the fossil fuel capital of Canada and exerts big political power and so on. But we look at the UK, where Ed Miliband for the Labour government is doing remarkable things. Today, they announced that every new house built in the UK will come with solar panels on the roof. That's a big step. So there are places around the world that are demonstrating what's possible. It would be nice if the US was part of that, not the force trying to slow it down.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Bill. And that is really what we're trying to do. That is really what we're trying to do with Climate Action Now. We're trying to do rapid turnaround to sort of meet the moment with the speed of like being able to transform a scientific study or one of your articles or a successful bill passed in one state to be recommended to another state in a matter of days or even hours to try to unleash that energy, to try to unleash the green building boom, like that excellent article of yours in 2023 that I repeatedly cite to people, that we need to build a huge amount of clean energy very fast right now. We're really trying to make that happen with sort of a rapid way of turning sort of information into activism. So that is
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the interesting comment from Paul in the chat saying he bets he gets 40 years out of his solar panels, which I think may well be true. And I also think, and this is the really interesting part about this, that since we keep getting better and better at making them, which means we make them with much less stuff with each passing iteration, there's a kind of not just recyclability or circular economy here, but a super circular kind of Mobius strip economy. So the oldest solar panels on my roof, I have 3 generations now, are about 25 years old. And when the time comes that the weather has degraded the panels themselves to the point where they're less effective than I want, and we replace them, the constituent parts of those old solar panels, say the silver that's in them, because we've gotten so much better at making them over the years, each one of the solar panels that we take down and recycle will have enough silver to make 8 or 10 new generation solar panels. And so, I mean, basically, within 10 or 20 years, we'll have done all the mining we need to do to carry this experiment on into the future. This is so different from how we're used to thinking about resources, but people need to just keep reminding themselves of the fundamental difference. If you go mine some lithium or cobalt and put it in a solar panel or a battery, it sits there for 25 years, 30 years, 40 years doing its job, and then you recycle it and get it almost all back for the next round of technology. If you go mine some coal, you set it on fire, it burns up, and then you have to go mine some more tomorrow. A way to keep this in your head is 40% of all the ship traffic on planet Earth is just carrying coal and oil and gas back and forth across the planet to get burned. A job that the sun is and the wind are happy to do for free every day. Imagine a world where ship traffic dropped by 40%. That's the kind of dematerialization that's entirely possible as we head forward.
And I actually think this is a good spot for me to jump in, just trying to be mindful of the time. So thank you so much to Sam and Bill for the great conversation so far. I want to take a moment before we wrap up to take some action all together. So if you're just here for Bill McKibben and this is your first time hearing about Climate Action Now, our app and website make it easy to send well-researched, personalized messages to political decision makers and business leaders. So if you're taking action with us today, you'll be able to use the app or the website. But one added benefit of using the app is that you can earn points by taking action. And when you earn enough points, Climate Action Now will plant a real tree on your behalf. So I'm going to share my screen and show you just how easy it is to take action in the app. All right, so this is an example action. And as you can see, it will only take 3 touches to take an action. So first, you touch Do It Now. Then you can choose how you want to contact the decision maker that you're reaching out to. And because the app has your address, it knows who your federal, state, and sometimes local officials are. Then you just have to hit send, and you've taken an action. It's that easy. Earlier, I mentioned earning points toward a real tree, and so far the Climate Action Now community has actually planted over 360,000 trees together. So now that you've seen a sample action, that brings us to the action we'll be taking together today. We'll be sharing some important research with our state leaders about solar farms, which Bill McKibben recently covered in his newsletter, and Sam is covering in an upcoming Daily Dose. As a bonus action, we'll be urging the 4 Senate Republicans who have expressed support for preserving the Inflation Reduction Act's clean energy tax credits to hold their ground as the reconciliation process proceeds. The QR code directly above app QR code, the QR code right above petition QR code will take you to a petition for Senator Murkowski. And once you've signed that one, you'll be taken to a page where you can quick sign the rest. And here's a fun fact for all of you. This is the official debut of Climate Action Now's brand new petition engine, which makes you the first group of people to use it. So go ahead and take out your phones or tablets and open up your camera app. If you have or want to download the Climate Action Now app, feel free to use the QR code box right above app QR code. And as you're pointing your camera at the screen, a little pop-up that says Climate Action Now should appear. Once it does, just tap on it to get to today's actions. If you don't have the app already, tapping that bubble will take you to the app store where you can download it for free. And once you have the app, all you need to do is follow the prompts to sign up, and it will take you right to today's action. Now, if you're not on the app or prefer to take action using a web form, feel free to scan the QR code above website QR code instead. And if it's not working for you, don't worry, I will drop direct links to the actions in the chat. So that's everything from me. As you take these actions, I'm going to hand things back over to Sam and Bill for some final thoughts. So back to you guys.
So Bill, thank you so much for sharing this. And I really appreciate everything you're doing. And I'm just really, really thankful for all the work you're doing. And I'm really trying to help carry that forward and build on all the work and activist sort of mobilization and the community of people who care about the climate that you've built, and help give them more tools and contribute to that ongoing global Manhattan Project effort. So,
Sam, so many thanks to you and your team for keeping us focused on good news. You know, it's important that we are very clear about all the bad things that are happening. And I've spent much of my life dutifully doing that. And I think it's important because we don't want to walk off this climate cliff without realizing it. On the other hand, it's incredibly empowering to imagine that we could be doing things differently. That doesn't mean that they happen automatically. That's why the kind of things that you were just asking people to do that Kaylee was telling us about those things are truly important. And sometimes we need to come together across these movements for mass action that makes things noisy enough, big enough, loud enough that they can't be ignored. You paid reference to the first Earth Day in 1970 a few minutes ago. And, when we have our next, this Sunday thing was kind of, though it's now spread across the whole movement was kind of birthed that third act, this group we've set up for those of us over the age of 60 to work on climate and democracy. And our next all-in call in a few days, next week on June 18th, we'll have Dennis Hayes, who built the first Earth Day in 1970. 20 million people came out that day, 10% of the then population of the United States. That was enough to change the zeitgeist so profoundly that a corrupt Republican president gave us the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Endangered Species Act, all the things that they're now trying to destroy. We have to do those sort of things again. So have at it, everybody. A little bit of anger, some sadness, and as much hope and joy and possibility as we can muster.
That is brilliant. Yeah. A little bit of anger, some sadness, and as much hope, joy, and possibility as we can muster. That's a motto. That's a plan. Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you all, and thanks to everybody who joined us today. And see you at Sunday.Earth.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to take the opportunity to also plug Substack newsletter, climateactapp.substack.com, just with the link in the chat, where we have every weekday a daily dose with a new action that you can do in the app or in a web form to advance everything Bill's talking about, this amazing opportunity to make a better world. And we also have a quiz every Saturday and a just news roundup every Sunday. And then Sunday.Earth is hopefully the next big paradigm shift in the making that is set for September 21st, 2025, anywhere across America. Do anything to advance renewable energy. Invite someone to see your heat pump. Go on a parade in your electric bike. Send a letter to your town council or state legislator asking them to default to permitting solar farms. Do whatever you want, and check out our resources app and website for ideas to help spread this incredible global technological, sociological, socioeconomic, and biological revolution of solar power forward. Because the world's a big and complex place, and we are simultaneously seeing unprecedentedly horrible things happen, especially in America, and unprecedentedly great things happen in America and around the world. We have incredible technologies that are utopian dreams that generate clean electricity while improving habitat for wildlife and reducing reliance on billionaires and oligarchs and autocracies. We have more tools to make a better world than ever before. Thank you all so much.
While you're at it, go listen to a little bit of Brian Wilson, maybe The Warmth of the Sun today, and a little bit of Sly Stone too, who died 2 days ago. Hot fun in the summertime. Let's have some. Take care, y'all.
Take care. Thank you so much. And Bill, thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. For anyone who's still in the call, we've got a few minutes where I just want to share a little bit about our upcoming events as well. So if you've enjoyed this event today, we've got lots more where this came from. On Wednesday, June 18th, we'll have a Protect the IRA action party together, where we'll help save key provisions of the U.S. landmark climate legislation that are currently under threat in the Trump administration's Big Ugly Bill. That will be featuring an update from Climate Reality Project's U.S. legislative manager. On Wednesday, June 25th, we'll have a Plant-Based Revolution Climate Action Party, where we'll be joined by senior leaders from Beyond Meat, Sprout, and the nonprofit think tank Good Food Institute. And finally, for our next monthly dose of climate hope in July, that's up and able to be registered for if you'd like to join us for another dose of climate hope. And that will be featuring the food technology investment analyst, Ishan Samaranayake. So we've got a link for all of those in the chat. We'll send out a recording of this event and some key resources and action QR codes in an email tomorrow. And we thank everyone for being here today. To our planning team, we'll open the breakout room named panel now. And thank you all for being here today.